Since you're new to the show, let's find out about you, Jason. Now that you've shifted from one show to this show, what's it all about for you? I mean, this series. I mean,
well, obviously, I have to, say a disclaimer up front, which is there's a lot of things I can't talk about, unfortunately. My journey really on this has been about sort of how I fit into this incredible world that has already been created, ahead of time, and I really enjoyed watching season 1 and season 2. I watched them sort of like a fan would. I binge watched them. So really just finding a way into the world for my character. The writers had come up with quite a rich backstory, and so I'm able to use that, especially as the story deepens, and he does and says certain things that will affect the action and the choices that are made. So I can say though that he's not a Nazi. He's Irish. His name was Wyatt Price, or at least that's one of his names, and we discover him in the neutral zone, but he won't stay in the neutral zone forever. So that's just about all I can tell you.
So when we left John, I was really impressed with kind of the stuff that was going on behind his eyes as he was brought up onto that stage while everybody was cheering, and it seemed almost like he was a little apprehensive or surprised by it and trying to comprehend that. So now he is in the Den of Vipers. Before in America, he was kind of able to do things without the high command really knowing about it. But now he's straight in with the Nazi high command. How is he going to be functioning?
Well, he always was. He was always, Obergruppenführer is very high position already. And yes, what you picked up on was the fact that part of him is thinking, well, that's really torn it, because he's not someone who's ambitious for ambition's sake. For me, it's very important, that distinction. He's someone who, for reasons that he believed were the right reasons, no matter how misinformed or skewed that was, he picked a side that he thought was the safest for his country, and then realised quite, over a period of time that he had aligned himself to something really terrible. His way of coping with that was to just pull the mask tighter, and so he has these feelings, and he realises, at the same time that he's going higher and higher up in that world, his doubts only grow because of what's happening in his life, but the doubts that were always there. And one reason why it's an advantage for him to be powerful, he has no choice to get more powerful because of what's going on in his family, in his genetic makeup. They're coming for him unless he makes himself completely safe. So he has to, in one way, align himself ever closer with the machine that's asking to take his children one at a time. So he doesn't feel good about that. It's very, very complex for him. So that's kind of the journey that continues. And for me, the more powerful he gets, the more difficult it is to be able to find drama, because you don't want him to be able to be so powerful that he can just fix it all. But there's always someone more powerful. There's always someone out to get him. And as far as I'm concerned, I hope they always will be. Otherwise, it gets a bit dull.
I think to kind of piggyback on what you were asking, I think that it's really interesting to compare to that. I think that we were introduced to as we were talking earlier, like the story. It's really interesting that we're introduced to Johnson as like a very, villainous character, but then we realize soon that his Achilles heel is kind of like the support of his movie and his family. And so then we see that, as you were saying, how like the character is growing to something that we thought was the best for. So would you say that your character is more, I don't want to say like a family man, like that?
No, I would say that the appeal of him, when I read the first episode of season 1, I had grave doubts. Because he seemed so... I didn't have a scene with anyone who wasn't hanging upside down in chains, which is not normally a good sign. It might be on a weekend, but generally not in a TV show. The fact that he'd been added compounded my suspicion that this might be a kind of one-dimensional creation to kind of anchor the evil of the show. So I spoke to Frank Spotnitz, who was in Paris at the time, and he said, well, actually, there is a second episode already, because it was written as a 2-hour first night. And in that second episode, you saw him with his family being relatively, calm father. You saw a gunfight from his perspective. And I was told about these potential upcoming stories. And what appealed to me was the idea of him as a kind of an everyman who'd taken the wrong path. And Nazism, as far as I'm concerned, is designed to bring out the worst in people, not just bad guys, but it takes people and it makes Nazis of them. And it gives them opportunities to look away from certain truths and blah, 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 blah. That's how it can happen. And I've always pushed for that, and that's what's been. And occasionally, scripts would come in and they'd veer towards classic villain. I'd always try to find something to, it's a balance.
Yeah, I definitely think that.
Good.
Of course, the writing and the voice it's very interesting because a villain isn't, or not even a villain. I feel like it's almost true person who learns, but someone with villainous characteristics are really interesting because they have
Well, they're interesting if there's conflict, or if there's,
I watched the trailer for the new season. What I found interesting is you're introduced to this concept of the multiverse.
I think it's more of a clip than a trailer.
It is a clip and trailer. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Clip preview.
Just to make it clear, that doesn't represent the whole show.
It is a clip. It's not right.
I'd love it if it did. There's other people and stuff.
There you go.
Apparently.
But you're struggling with accepting what's being told to you. Is that a way of keeping the anchor of reality?
Absolutely. I mean, if I, sometimes in scripts, especially if there's any genre side to it, you can go into a thing where people just accept jargon as a given. They don't do what they would do in real life. I mean, you watch a vampire movie, it's different now since Tarantino. Before then, people would say, oh, it's a vampire. People go, vampire? What's a vampire? You'd think, what fucking world are you from? Have you not seen films?
Right.
But it's the opposite is true, that, when someone introduces interdimensional travel to someone from the 1960s, they're not going to have seen all the shows. They're not going to know. They haven't seen Lost. They haven't seen, So it's very important to get out of the shortcuts. Avoid the shortcuts of writing and of acting, because you've got to take the audience in there.
As actors, does working on a show like this make you look at current events or political events differently in a different light?
Well, it makes it look at them in a different light, but I think the idea is to remind people. Well, I mean, the idea is just to make a good show, but I mean. I think the show serves to remind people that things could still get worse, and this could still happen, and why are we still talking about Nazis? I wish we were talking about Nazis as if they were something that just happened a long time ago.
I often say to people, people say, oh, your show's really current. I said, well, I could do with being in a less current show in a better world, frankly. I'm not that keen on being of the moment in my TV choices. But I think what's also very useful about this show, from my perspective, is to tell the story of how you can, bit by bit, incrementally get used to horrors.
Yes.
And distract yourself with the minutiae of your life. And this way, these things are possible. The natural ability we have, which is, for a good reason, to get used to stuff, to find our balance. Yeah. If that becomes too strong, then horrors are possible.
When horror becomes mundane,
absolutely,
it's very
that's
dangerous.
What's happened. That's how Germany, Germany did not contain all of the worst people in the world in a particular period. It could happen anywhere, because people incrementally look at what people get used to. Look at what is shocking one day, and then it happened again too. Doesn't even come up in conversation. That happens in a matter of weeks. You go from the worst thing you've ever heard to not even mentioning it in a room.
Well, I guess it's less of a show. I think that.
And just that's how it's current, I suppose. That's how. But it was true in 1962 when he wrote it, and it's still unfortunately very true now.
And I think that's interesting because I think that superficially you can say that the show is just a fun, or not fun, an alternate universe sci-fi kind of world. It's a fun show to watch. But I think from what you guys are talking about and how you approach it and acting and in the writing as well, I think it's almost more of a story about the human condition.
Yeah.
Something horrific, something that is
what humans do. It'd be fine if it wasn't for humans.
In that first episode of the series, there's that bit where Joe's got the flat tire, I guess, and the cops helping them.
That's
and
the show.
And the ashes are coming down to the people who are being in the furnaces because they were the older or the injured or whatever invalids. To me, that was so
but the
powerful.
horror of that is that alongside a recognizable, perfectly likable New York cop guy with his sandwiches wrapped up by his big worry that day was it going to be spam or chicken in his sandwich? Not that. And that says so much more about that. Well, that's what's chilling, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. This is a bit of a joke, but this is a question for Jason. If I'm not mistaken, or maybe I'm just learning out, but if I recognize your voice properly, have you done Batman in the series?
Yeah, I played Batman in a few of the DCU
So
original
awesome.
universe animation feature films.
I guess
Nice.
my question, aside from my personal tangent for it, how is it? Of course, it must be different, but how is it different from going from that and experiencing that and feeling like being used as a huge character, and then going into a show that you're a huge fan of and acting in? How are those two experiences?
It's completely different, standing in front of a microphone, you're using completely sort of different drawers of your toolkit than trying to play a character in flesh and blood.
Different tools from your bat belt.
Yes, thank you, Ruth.